President, please be seated. The court is now back in session. The chamber would like to inform the parties that the interviews are conducted by the Year 4 student to assist the experts regarding the marriages in the DK are available, but the experts does not bring the document along with her, and she promises to bring for the chamber and the relevant parties tomorrow. And the floor is now given back to the defense team for Mr. Kyo Sompon to resume the questioning. Again, the records of the interviews conducted by the student and the record of the interviews were requested by the international co-prosecutor. The expert confirms that she has all the relevant documents, but she does not bring along with her today. She has the clean version at her residence, and she promises that she will bring the relevant documents for the chamber tomorrow's morning, and the documents will also be disseminated to parties. Do you wish to add something, Judge Laverne? We want the experts to provide the documents right now. However, the documents have some annotations on them, so she promises to bring the clean version tomorrow.
To clarify it for English, we are talking about the clean copy of the questionnaire.
In order to be even clearer, because in French we're speaking about questionnaires in the plural, or at least that's what I understood. Maybe the expert can contradict this if I'm wrong, but what she is willing to bring is the form for the questionnaire, not all of the answers, but the form, the questionnaire form. I see that the expert agrees, so you can note this in the record. Well, let me get back to where we were, Ms. Levine. Therefore, you explained, if I understood the figures well, that you said that you conducted personally 90 interviews and 102 that were conducted with the students who worked with you, which makes up the 192 interviews of your study. Am I clear with the figures?
Yes, but just to fine-tune that, I did the 22 individuals, which were 11 couples initially, and then I did 90 interviews where I used the form that I created after the interviews with the 11 couples. And then I had students, so I could get saturation in my sampling, I had students do 102 of those forms with the 13 questions that I read out loud earlier.
I know.
Well, maybe I'm not very good at math, but if you conducted, okay, well, let's start from the beginning. So among the 90 interviews that you said you conducted personally, do you include the 22 initial ones, or do the 90 interviews correspond to the second sampling? I'm sorry, but I'm not very good with math.
Sorry, yes, you were correct in your calculations. The 90 included the 22. and the students did 102, which adds up to 192. Thank you for that clarification.
Okay, let's.
Fine. Now things are more logical to me. Now, regarding the interviews, aside from the 22 first ones of your chosen sample, so now we're speaking about the random sample of the other interviews. Did you make a conscious geographical choice, or was it random that dictated the location of the interviews? And maybe to refresh your memory a little bit and to refresh the memory of the chambers and of the party, I'm referring in particular to a map with the locations where you worked. And so this is document E3/1794 on page 8 in Roman numerals. That is the English ERN 00482430. So it's page 8 in Roman numerals at the very beginning of the dissertation. And these are the locations and the names of the people you interviewed per location. I'm going to try to read this out slowly. So 5 people in Phnom Penh, 3 people in Siem Reap, 53 people in Kandal province, 21 in Preveng province, 8 in Svay Rieng, 7 in Kompong Cham, 1 in Koh Kong, 28 in Takeo, 18 in Battambang, 8 in Porsat, 7 in Kompot, 18 in Kompong Speu, 6 in Kompong Tom, 4 in Kompong Chnang, 1 in Ratanakiri, 2 in Previhir, 1 in Odarmenchei, 1 in at Malay Mountain. So this is what these are the locations you identified. And apparently these are the number of people corresponding to these different locations. So let me repeat my question, please. So was there a specific choice here in terms of geography, or was this done at random?
My first sample had a large proportion of people who were married in the Southwest. So I have to hold that over to the side a bit because it increased the numbers in the Southwest. Even though I did a random sampling, I'm aware that I had a large number of people who were married in Kandal province. And I still can't speak for how that happened, other than I think that my snowballing probably had a familiar factor that led people in that region to then lead me to somebody else in that region. So I can't give 100% rationale for that factor. What I can say about that, however, is it became an advantage for me in my data analysis of the weddings because of a number of things. One is I have noticed in most of the research that has been done on this topic, there has been a high prevalence of subjects from that region. So it has allowed me, say, to compare my study to, say, Mom's study, or perhaps a study that my Japanese colleague has done. So that region has allowed me to really, if you will, go in and look at what has been missing in other studies. Oftentimes what's been missing in other studies has been the time and place data. So when I look at other people's work and I see a collection or a booklet of extracts from transcripts, and I see a high proportion of violence being presented, I can look at my Kandal study and say, oh, I imagine that perhaps there could have been a time bias in that outcome, because in late 77 and 78, it was a very bleak time there. However, before that period and after that period, it became very different in how the weddings were organized and what happened to people after the weddings. So it became a nice artifact for me to have that large sample in the end for analysis. But I do think that it's unbalanced, and yet it has been helpful.
Well, things are moving by so fast that I'm going to try to press ahead and maybe get back if I have time afterwards. Well, earlier we spoke about arranged marriage and Khmer tradition, and you spoke about the fact that it was essentially an affair of families, and you insisted on the plural. You said that it could be taken in a broader way, that saying that it involved the community at large. And in the dissertation you spoke about the importance, when we're speaking of traditional marriages and of marriages in Cambodia in general, you spoke about the importance of not having a Eurocentric vision. In fact, you used the expression Euro-American, if I base myself on the words you used, and in particular with the idea that love is supposed to be a premise for marriage in European culture. And Nakagawa explained that the notion of love could be an extra after marriage in Cambodia, but regarding considerations to arrange a marriage in a traditional context, it was not necessarily a priority. So my question is, can you tell us and explain to the chamber how or what is the difference in concept as an anthropologist regarding the notion of love and as a preliminary condition for an arranged marriage?
From an anthropological perspective, there are two terms we often use, emic and etic. Emic is the point of view from within the culture itself. Etic is the point of view of looking at a culture as an outsider. I worked very hard to keep getting closer and closer to recording the emic views of my respondents. So that meant that I had to take my views of love and other notions of what it is that creates a partnership and move those a bit to the side while I listened to how my respondents described their bonds. I think the word bond is probably a more culturally responsive term than the word love. What bonds people? What bonded people during this period? Love was rarely discussed. It's an artifact, if it happened at all, for the couples that I interviewed. And again, I interviewed people, I started with couples who are still together. And in those 13 questions, one of the questions is what kept you together? I have rank ordered what has kept people together in my data analysis, but without rumbling through pages, one thing that kept people together was the experience of the other person's kindness. That was essential to people staying together. That, you know, we both worked hard And I worked a little bit harder and longer in the day, so when I came back to our hut, my wife counted out more grains of rice for me because I worked harder. Those were the kinds of responses people gave about their bonds. The other thing was terms that, again, from an emic perspective, kuprin. The Buddha arranged our marriage before we were born. It's a very interesting concept to get one's head around, especially around the Khmer Rouge period, because I actually had one couple say together in front of me, so we wonder, if this period hadn't happened, would we have met? It's a very interesting question to ask when someone has the experience of kuprin, what keeps us together. Other things that people said kept them together had nothing, well, first of all, what had nothing to do with them being together was whether they had a disability, though I really didn't find any in my sample. Whether someone was beautiful or ugly, it really was inconsequential to the kindness of the bond that kept people together. I had thought, as a psychologist, before I went into my study, that what would have kept people together, if I had hypothesized, would have been the co-experience of surviving extreme traumatic experiences. That was rarely mentioned. What kept people together was the potential to build a family. That was important to them, regardless of how they arrived at that place together. Touch, to be able to have safe touch. Touch was missing throughout the Cambodian period. So the sense of being able to have somebody just kindly touch someone, safely touch someone, that was very important, and that was mentioned frequently in my study. So love, I think, is a bonus. Yes, I certainly had people who grieved someone that they loved because they were arranged with someone else, or they may have been angry about that, but they never, in my sample anyway, I didn't have anyone say, oh, because I didn't love this person, it meant I was forced to marry them. It was a very separate concept. I was surprised by that. But again, I just asked the open question.
Well, in fact, regarding this issue of love and family choice, and that may explain this prevalence of bonding over love. So let me refer to what we heard before this chamber. Nakagawa explained a phenomenon that we heard witnesses speak about before this chamber. That is to say that and the expert was speaking about people outside of DK. She's speaking about marriages outside of DK, and she said that sometimes the first time the spouse met her husband was the day of the marriage itself. And I'm referring here to Nakagawa's statement of 13 September 2016, a little bit before 11:03 in the morning. And this is what she said when she was answering a question, and I will quote in English.
Donc la question.
So the question that was put to her was, what was the level of participation of women in the choice of a husband before the decision of marriage? And this is what she said.
It depends on the parents as to how much information they give to their daughters. The many women that I interviewed, the wedding day was the first time that they met with their husband. So they knew very little about their husband before the marriage. But again, they don't regard the women, they don't regard as unfortunate marriage because they were happy to accept and follow the decision by their parents. End of quote.
So my question is going to be double. In the interviews you conducted regarding marriages before 1970, do you have examples of people